I've been wanting to do a new engine build for a while, man. Box stock torque build. It's gonna be built from a box stock project go-kart racing engine. And I'm only gonna do that build on Teachable. Now someone asked if I could do a video on how do you convert the stock 1 gallon tank to a true like a 6 gallon marine tank with the fuel pump and all that. I'll do a video on it, but I'm only gonna put it on Teachable once I get to that point in the build. The build is gonna be paid, but I believe I'll just go ahead and do the conversion to a marine tank for free, and I'll have that for free on Teachable. You know, it's kind of nice to have your eggs in more than one basket, right? And so YouTube I love YouTube, I love the platform, but there's certain things I wanna have only for those people who are very serious about what I'm doing, where more of a teaching boot camp type environment. Teachable is a way better platform than that. All right, so top 4 power heads for building Thailand Longtail style mud motors. Number 4, the Harbor Freight non-Hemi engine. That's the one that I built from. The great thing about the Harbor Freight motors is you get a bunch of displacement. As far as building engines, I'm really talking about the small blocks. The things I don't like about them is I'm not so stoked about the castings on it. I don't know if I trust it because, you know, I blew up the one motor and that was user error on my part. It's not having the clearances and things like that right. I don't consider the Harbor Freights to be the same motor as a clone. There's a different category because of the measurements are different, the exhaust is different, the rods are different, the crank is different. It is a different motor with a lot of power in that because you have so much more displacement. There's no replacement for displacement, and you get a lot more displacement in a Harbor Freight motor. Downside with Harbor Freight is that the tolerances and the clearances are they're just power generator motors, guys. You just run at 33,000 RPM for 15 hours a day, just powering your whatever. Once you go from the realm of power generators and power equipment, like log splitters and stuff like that, and go towards vehicle propulsion, you've just gone up in terms of order of magnitude in terms of the clearances. You've gone from dealing in hundredths of an inch to dealing with thousandths of an inch. Right? You're dealing with higher RPMs and more power and more torque. And you could take, if you took 5 Harbor Freight motors and lined them up and checked the tolerances, how deep in the hole, how you know the width, the diameter of the crankshaft, all that stuff is going to be so wildly different because the tolerances are not very tight. It doesn't really matter. All right, number 3, I would say probably a Dyno, you know, the company that makes the Dyno Cams, like the company who makes the Mod 2 camshaft. I'd say Dyno Cams, they're Honda clone. Well, they make some really good camshafts. You get all the specs on the camshafts. They work with a Chinese manufacturer who produces these little engines, and the Chinese are capable of building anything to any quality level that you want, right? Don't blame the Chinese for the fact that the tolerances are bad on a design, all right? It's the company who commissioned the Chinese to build it that have said, oh, we don't really care about the tolerances being that close, or bearings being that tight, or the wheels being that small on the Harbor Freight. So don't blame the manufacturer, blame the company who commissioned the design, right? What the guys at Dyno did was go talk directly with them, and they decided, hey, we're going to take this engine and we're going to build it to a tighter set of tolerances. So that if you lined up 5 Dyno engines, they're going to be far more closely, the tolerances are going to be a lot tighter. You're going to get a better base motor. That's what I like about it. And Dyno has a very low-cost flywheel that I believe they just imported. It has the same design as an ARC flywheel, except it isn't billet. It's steel billet, heavier flywheel, but the magnets in that flywheel are encased inside the flywheel. Just get on there, the Dyno PVL or PLV, whatever flywheel, put that on there, and you'll see the design works. And you know, you're talking about a $60 flywheel, $70 flywheel, as opposed to a $100 flywheel from ARC. And it's tested to like 17,000 RPM or something. And Dyno makes a variety of camshafts. They have so many camshafts that work. Number 2 choice, Harbor Freight Hemi engine, the Hemi. When I first heard of the Hemi, and so I just didn't, it just seemed more complicated. I just didn't like it. But the more and more I've read, the more and more I've, watched Jody's videos, who works at Arc Racing, talk about building these big modified motors, and I'm talking about where they're like really are producing probably like 30 horsepower with these motors. Hemi, if you want to make horsepower, the Hemi is the way to go. The head on that Hemi, the cylinder head, is almost like a custom head that you would buy from one of these engine builders. Head has I know it has a 27 millimeter intake versus say like the Dyno would only have like a 25 millimeter intake. So you're getting a big head that can flow, man, straight out the box. I mean, you can just bolt on a 22 millimeter Mikuni and that thing will just run. If you're really gonna build from a Harbor Freight motor, I'm be honest with you, I recommend that you just go with a Hemi. So the number 1 engine that I'm gonna recommend for building an engine, your box stock project engine. They're just like the Dyno engines in that they work directly with the Chinese manufacturers to bring them over and build them to a tighter set of tolerances. In addition to making the tolerances tighter, and the guys at Dyno may have done this as well, but I don't know, at least they don't talk about it as much, is that first of all, they yank the governor and the oil sensor out. You don't even have to worry about it. It's already been yanked out. It was never installed in the first place. Oh, they took the internal components of these motors and started heat treating them to the T6 heat treated, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the rod. They heat treated them. So if you take that engine that has been built to a tighter set of tolerances and you heat treat the internal components, you're going to have a better motor straight off the bat. But I'm not going to stop there with my build. I'm definitely going to be changing some of the internal components. But if you want to know, you got to go to the website. You got to go to Teachable to find out what it's going to be. So you can register for the school, my Black Warrior Lures boot camp, and then I'll let you know when I'll be coming out with the class as I get further along with the build. Although when things start spinning up, especially we're running 5,000 and 6,000 RPM, the actual crankshaft and rods and things are going to be bending and flexing. That was one of the errors I had in my other one. I had taken out all the flex and the end play. The great thing I love about the box stock engines, and Dyno probably comes this way, they have a spec sheet where it has all the tolerances, all the torque specs, all those specifications, so you can measure everything to see, make sure it's within that certain range and tolerance. But anyway, that's my top 4 power heads for Thailand longtail mud motors. Non-Hemi, Harbor Freight, the Dyno Cams motor for number 3, the Hemi 212 Harbor Freight, and the number 1 is the box stock. For me and what I want to do, I need the precision from the factory. I'm going to stick with box stock or Dyno. For those of you who want horsepower and you'll just do whatever it takes to get the tolerances right, go with either of the Hemis and you'll be good to go. It is time for me to get building.